the power of stupid ideas that get taken too far. This is back 5 years ago, I was working with David Lewis, who's one of the organizers of SydJS. And I'd had this random thought one day of, what if we tried to mix it up and had an event where we got 3 experienced presenters to do 5-minute lightning talks, but without knowing what they're going to be talking about until the start of the evening. It was basically an idea of like using some sort of roulette wheel to just, pick a topic. And so we called it presentation roulette. And I was like, yeah, this could maybe work. And the next day I got a message from Fiona, who's the other main organizer, who's saying, yep, love the idea. We've already got someone lined up and you're going to be talking too. Okay, that's quick. So then I actually had to commit to this and build this theoretical roulette wheel. But by working with David, I was able to actually refine things and we could kind of shoot ideas back and forward. And I was doing this basically on the train to and from the office, and I tried to use as many different bits of CSS as I could while building this, with the sneaky tactic of whatever my random topic ended up being, I could just use how I built the roulette wheel to be the presentation. That ended up being completely foiled when they realized that the presenters would need about 20 minutes to prepare a 5-minute talk, so we needed to talk in the middle, and that's what I would then be doing. But what we ended up with is this. This is the Wheel of Talks. And this is just running in a browser, and I will actually just double check that it is playing the sound correctly. And the idea is, we do it a game show kind of theme night, and we would get someone to walk up and press the big button down the bottom, and when they press it, we get spinning wheel, and there's your topic. And you've got 20 minutes. Now, Lachlan, who was speaking before from Atlassian, he was actually one of the presenters, and he got Speaker's Choice on the night. But the great thing with this is that it was just a stupid idea that got taken a little too far, but it spurred so many other things. So Lachlan actually ended up giving a conference talk about how math.random works, because although this is built with randomness, 2 out of the 3 people got exactly what they wanted from the topics. And people thought it was rigged, but it is literally just math.random. But we were all like, how does that actually work? So conference talk came out of this. But what I want to actually show is how it was built. So the idea is not a lot of people actually do a lot of stuff with 3D CSS, and this is it's sort of 3D. It's a faux 3D effect. But really, all it is, it's just a list. But rather than kind of showing it in here, I will give you an example here. So I'll try and embiggen this. This is a very broken down version of what the wheel looks like. And if we actually rotate it here, I'll rotate it around. Here we go. It's a list of things in a cylinder, and you can set it spinning. Now, the fun part of that, this was a little challenge, because I wanted the challenge of writing this presentation style entirely within a browser. So Chrome DevTools actually have this interesting thing where you can map sources on a website to your local file system. And when you write within the code editor here, it is actually saving to your file system. So I could prototype and test and save the files entirely within the browser. It was a really, really fun challenge. But to give you an idea of how this is done, this was, unfortunately, I had to go back and try and relearn high school trigonometry. But I ended up writing a post about this. And the basic idea is you have a circle and you just build a polygon around the circle, and then you just try and work out, we know how high each item is. We can work out the angle of between the items because it's just 360 degrees of a circle divided by the number of items, and we push each item out by a certain distance, which is where the trigonometry comes in. So I will show here. This is effectively what we do with the list. Just move each item, position it absolutely, spin it around, and push it out by a certain distance. And that's all well and good, but it shouldn't look like this. We apply a bit of different styling, and what we get is something like this. This is the same effective cylinder of items, and it's a rectangle, and it's great, it spins and things, but it doesn't look particularly like a seamless 3D wheel. So this is where a whole bunch of just little experimentation came in. And things like this are always interesting to present because in reality, you're playing with things back and forth and you're trying different ideas and you've got a mess of different code and some things work and some things don't. And it all kind of comes together in the end and you keep tweaking, but then you go to present and you go, oh yes, here's this neat narrative of, oh, I added this and then I added this, but that's not how it works in the real world, but it's the best way to present it. So, first thing we need is some sort of background, so I'll shrink that down a bit. So we have some sort of background there. This is just a div, it's got a box shadow, it's got these little stud kind of things. This was pretty quickly hacked together in a browser. But these studs are actually they're not a separate element. They're a little before pseudo element with a hell of a lot of box shadows. All positioned, there's 2 box shadows per stud and all just positioned neatly. I'm using a whole bunch of CSS custom properties, which is basically variables for the width, height, that kind of thing, so I can use all sorts of calculations based on them. I'll cancel that out, but how do I make this boxy thing look kind of smooth? And this is where gradients come in and clip paths. So what we can do is the actual list container itself here, we can apply a clip path. So a clip path is just saying, let's cut off anything that is not outside this path. So I'm using an ellipse, and it's just calculated to be very tall so that it has a bit of a smooth curve. And the precise curvature of it was calculated using the incredibly precise method of whacking in a number and then keep fiddling with it until it looks about right. And that's why everything is variables. Because the fun thing is when you add or remove items, because we kept changing what the topics were, you need to keep changing what the angle is to make it look about right. A lot of very scientific tweaking. But then we have the problem. If I start making this spin, it's not as bad here, but you can see a little bit that there's a little bit of a rise and fall as the rectangular items hit the top and the bottom. So we put a little overlay on the top. And this is just, it's a simple div using a gradient. And the gradient goes from top to bottom, and it's just the background color, a bit of shading, and then through to transparent in the middle, and then mirror it on the end. So if I actually put the background back and I'll hide that, you can see there's a little bit of extra detail on the background here as well. But they sort of blend into each other. And again, this is just tweaking. It's a lot of tweaking. And then there's a similar clip path on the gradient. And those extra little black splodges on the background there, they're just radial gradients. So I'll hide these again. And go there. So 2 radial gradients, and they create splodges. And they look a bit weird when they're viewed on their own. But what they are for is that doesn't look particularly 3D. And even if we put the overlay back, it kind of looks right. But there's something very important to think about, which is, as we saw with the first presentation tonight, shading and shadow has a lot to do with this. So those extra little gradients on the background are just a little bit of shading behind a wheel that is allegedly sticking out of the screen. So it creates just enough shadow to create the effect. So there we go. That's the styling, and looks about right. But then there's the spinning. So how's the spinning done? And this is where we have a really interesting thing. We can do animations in CSS, but this is mostly controlled by JavaScript. But there is the Web Animation API. And what this allows you to do is have CSS transitions and animations, but defined in JavaScript and applied to an element. And in the browser, they all use the same underlying animation mechanism. So you can actually tie them together, and you can have CSS and JS animations all using the same timing system and the same overall layout system. But what you can do as well is chain the effects together. And this allowed for a bit of fun, because the basic idea of this evening was to have controlled chaos. We wanted to make it look as chaotic as possible, but only within particular boundaries. And so we'd get people to spin the wheel, and it's just a bit of an animation. You rotate it around. Cool. People like see, it slows down, it selects the topic. Cool. All right. Everyone knows how it works. And so we go again. And we wait, and we wait. And everyone can see exactly what it's about to hit until it doesn't. And this, when you've got a whole audience waiting, going, I can see how this is going. When it suddenly just jumps back, that's when they realize, okay, you still can't predict this. And this is actually just chaining animations. But once you realize you can easily chain animations, you can really start to have some fun with it. And you can play on the fact that people are going to be trying to guess what is going to happen. We generally create, so we've now done this for 3 separate SydCSS meetups. We generally do as the December one, because it's a nice kind of end of year muck around, and I try to create a different trick each time. Because if you keep this the same, people get used to it. It gets the same gimmick. Okay, but how could we increase the fun, increase the gimmicks, but not just with technology? So, like I said, we had this themed as a bit of a game show evening. One of the presenters, one of the hosts, would have like classic cheesy 80s sparkly jacket of a game show, Wheel of Fortune style. And so I thought, well, let's really lean into that. So the second time we ran this was 2019, and we could have some fun a lot. So, excuse me a second. $20 on eBay. You get a giant USB enter button, and instead of having people try and push the screen and use a bit of fake trickery, because whenever they press the button on the screen, it is literally me in the audience with a presenter remote. USB, always the wrong way around. So now you can actually press the button. And we can have people really come up and like give the button a smash. And that was actually fun because during testing I discovered that if you hold it down, it sends multiple events. And when you try to spin the wheel about 5 times in half a second, it does not go well. But I mean, that was a bit of fun. But a cheesy 80s style Wheel of Fortune host needs a cheesy 80s style Wheel of Fortune introduction. That takes people by surprise every time. That one is, despite the title of SydCSS, not in CSS. That is actually a full-screen canvas element in JavaScript, because that way you can do interesting little tricks like pasting a bit of text and then not quite clearing the canvas and then pasting another bit of text but moving it slightly and changing the color slightly. And as you keep doing this, you get the colored trail effect. You can also start to muck around with transform animations. So as you're transforming where the text is each time, you can also change the origin of the transform of the entire canvas. And if you start animating those in separate directions, you can start to get a curve effect. Then I had to make it kind of spin and match the actual title, which is real text. That is a header using a font from Google Fonts. And for Hon's benefit, like you're talking about offline, handy trick for Google Fonts, the whole thing's a Git repository. And if you have a couple of gigabytes spare on your hard drive, you can just download that whole Git repository and put it into your local fonts directory, and then you've got everything offline. So I discovered the Canvas actually has some font metrics APIs as well. You can paste a bit of text and then measure exactly where the baseline of the text is, all the different font measurements about kind of how high in the text box it is. You can then use that to measure up against the exact header there and position them exactly and then just fade one to the other. Some extra little fun things. We had to try to experiment with this again because the next time we did it was 2020. And December 2020 was very, very different from December 2019. For a start, we had to do the whole thing remotely, which was interesting. Didn't entirely work, but we had to make sure, obviously, everything had to adhere to social distancing protocols, including all our presentations. So again, yes, it's a bit of a gimmick. This is just an SVG of a face mask, but this is seriously just animating the text, the letter spacing within the header, and that's all it is. You can just toggle between the two of them. So really, this started as just, I had a bit of a brain fart idea one day, and very quickly spiraled out of control. But in doing so, I learned a hell of a lot about CSS. I learned a hell of a lot more about JS animations. I learned new things about Canvas that I didn't know about, even though I'd worked with it professionally for several years. And really, it was just about having a lot of fun. So the best thing about this is it's about the audience interaction as well. And sometimes you don't set out with a specific goal in mind. You just kind of go, yeah, this will be a bit of fun. And you try it out, and you see how people react, and then you just tweak it for the next time. We had actually considered doing an entirely different presentation kind of gimmick each time we did a December meetup. Harry Potter sorting hat, pick things off a Christmas tree. In the end, the reaction to this was so good that we just went, let's just keep doing this, but keep tweaking it each time. We changed the topics. Whenever someone gets a topic one year, we eliminate it, so it's not in the list for next year, so people can't keep trying to guess what they get. We've had people who get very, very creative with their presentations. Some people, like Lachlan, pre-prepared a slide deck with as many different template slides as possible, and then just tried to very quickly fill it in with whatever content that would actually fit the topic. We've had people just write a text file, but one line per screen, and then just scroll it as their slides. We had one of the best speakers in the Sydney Tech, Chris Howard. She went on a very lateral thinking journey where the topic was IE was awesome because, and she proceeded to tell us about every possible expansion of the acronym IE. So from the domain name for the Republic of Ireland through to industrial engineering, we eventually got to Internet Explorer. But it was a great way to answer the topic while not really doing so. What will happen this year? Will it happen this year? I have no idea. But I think I'm going to have fun finding out along with everyone else. Thank you very much.